shout out to Big shout out to Molly and to Adam from the Chamber, who are our tech gurus today, and they'll be making sure that the operations run smoothly. Without further ado, I don't think the giants need introduction, but I'm going to open up the room to Anthony. Anthony, if you'd like to say a big hello with Amber and introduce yourself to our guests.
Hey, thanks, Kaz. Appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Nice move there, Dan, as well. Good to see you. The silhouette, getting rid of the silhouette kind of Bond villain look. Appreciate that. good to be here, everyone. And so, yeah, just to briefly introduce myself. So I'm Ant, Managing Director of Sleeping Giant Media and co-founder of Sleeping Giant Media. Amber, did you want to say a few words about who you are and why you're here today?
Yeah, I can do. I'm actually in the office and there's a lot of people around, so it's lovely, but it means there's so many people here to like talk into a call, so it's odd. But I'm Amber, I'm the brand experience marketing manager. I'm here to support Ant, really, just to sort of see who's around, but I think I know all of you actually, so hi.
Hi, good to see you. Well, it's cool. Thanks, Amber. And we've got a fair bit of content to kind of work through today. Quite excited to share, and we've got kind of an intimate room, which is nice. So I think hopefully we can get questions going as we go, and I'm more than happy to kind of expand on the stuff that I kind of cover. So please don't hold back. I'm going to be presenting some slides, but if I kind of see chats and questions that I can kind of jump in with at the time, we'll totally do that as well. And then there'll be some time for discussion afterwards as well. So bear with me one moment, and I'm going to share my screen so you can all have a look at my deck. So just bear with me 1 second. Cool. Has everybody got our 13 years opening screen? Does that look good? Nice. Okay, brilliant. Well, let's get started. So as a subject line kind of, and the title indicates, today is our 13-year anniversary of setting up Sleeping Giant Media, which is really exciting. I sent Luke a text this morning, my business partner, saying congratulations. And I quickly wondered, should I send him a card or flowers? I was like, I don't know how it works when you've got a business relationship like that, but I didn't. But no, we are kind of very pleased to be here. So yeah, as I mentioned, that's me. I'm kind of MD, and that role really means that I have the privilege to kind of work with a bit of everybody across the business. You know, I help, you know, oversee kind of day-to-day operations, which I really enjoy, because I do get to get involved in a bit of everything, and kind of work with all the giants. And for those who don't know, Sleeping Giant Media is a digital marketing agency based loosely in Folkestone, although kind of spread about a fair bit. Although I am happy to say that today we have a full house in the office. It's kind of pretty much full up where Amber is now. And so it's a busy place, which is great because we've been remote for so long. We've kind of been dying for more interaction face to face. So more on that to come though later on. And a few, I guess, highlights of the kind of years gone by, some of the memorable moments and some of the many things that we've done as a business, just to kind of help set the scene. You know, we're a business of people, as I think pretty much every business is, and we really like to kind of recognise all the cool stuff we get to do together. And these are those people as well. The kind of giant Sleeping Giant Media, a business of about just over 60 people at the moment. We've got quite a lot of recruitment kind of going on, so that number keeps changing kind of weekly. It's an exciting time, I have to say, to kind of be in business. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the kind of 13 years of kind of SGM, and I've tried to kind of, it's been great to do, I have to say, because I don't do this sort of thing enough, but it's been really good to reflect on kind of the last 13 years and just think about what have the kind of the highlights been. You know, there haven't really been lowlights as such. I mean, there have been, but they've always turned into learning. So that's what I'm going to kind of, you know, share here. So I'm going to kind of jump in and out of kind of across the kind of years. There's not loads of content to look at on the screen, but just some kind of like joggers and some key messages. But as I say, drop thoughts in the chat, or please unmute yourself as well. That's cool too. We can definitely talk too. So first up, so 2008, so we incorporated in 2008, and that first year spanned 2008 and 2009. Luke and I were working at a company called Holiday Extras. No doubt you guys will be fairly familiar with them. If you ever booked airport parking, probably not recently, if you ever booked airport parking, you would have likely booked it through Holiday Extras on one of their kind of affiliates or intermediaries. And that's where we were working when we incorporated kind of Sleeping Giant Media. And I've just shown you all of those great glamorous looking photos of kind of SGM now. But if I just skip back to kind of where we were, this is what kind of Sleeping Giant Media looked like day one. And it was me and Luke with way more hair than we have now. In Luke's parents' place, because they moved to Corfu and they had an empty house. Fortunately for us, they allowed us to move in low rent, and we were fairly confident they wouldn't kick us out if we didn't pay the bills on time. So we could try and set up kind of Sleeping Giant Media. and that was a pretty exciting time. But we actually started part-time, so we were working for Holiday Extras, and we were trying to do stuff in our evenings and kind of at the weekends, and very quickly realized that was never going to be enough, particularly as an agency offering digital marketing services. We're a service provider. We need to be there when our clients need us. So asking clients to wait until my lunch break, or can they speak to me after work, was just never going to work. A long time, it was never going to happen. So we quickly realized it needed more. And the point I made there by, about it needing 100%, of what you have is the entry level, became really apparent really quickly. We moved to Luke and I were already living together with another friend in Canterbury. We moved to this like low cost option, which was awesome that we had that opportunity, and we lived together, and we gave everything we possibly had, to the startup of the business. We would wake up roughly same times, meet downstairs, and one of us would make breakfast, the other one would get started on work, and we would alternate kind of who did that. And that was literally how it worked until we went to sleep. And that night, and then the same happened again, throughout across the weekends. I'm a great believer in balance in life now more than ever before, and it's something that we really do push for across the agency. It's a big part of our culture in order to achieve, a great balanced life and awesome well-being. But back then, trying to get something off the ground, it wasn't about balance at all. It came at the sacrifice of relationships, friendships, kind of pretty much everything except for Sleeping Giant Media. And that's what it took, and that isn't sustainable. It's totally not sustainable. And we'll talk more about that kind of as the slides go on. But we realized pretty quickly that was what it was going to be. And I feel really kind of grateful that, I found a friend and a business partner at Luke so that we could actually go through that journey together. Because I know for a lot of people that hasn't been the case. And that really is quite incredible, I have to say. So that was our kind of first year. Not necessarily looking like the sort of people you trust with your multi-million-pound marketing spend, but that is where we started and how we started. And it was pretty cold. We didn't have the heating on, hence why we're all wrapped up in that house as well, looking to kind of cut the bills where we can. So moving on into kind of our next year. So at the beginning of 2009, we actually left Holiday Extras and we went full time. And then it was in kind of 2010 that we took on our kind of first employee. Now there's two employees, it looks like here. The lady there is actually Luke's now wife, then girlfriend. So she was in the picture to help us make us look bigger and big up the numbers. But Pete there was our first employee, and I do quite like talking about that first moment, because up until then, whilst it was hard work and it was challenging and it was exciting, we were only responsible for ourselves. We had no mortgages, we had no children. And we had no other responsibilities other than just to, make enough money to be able to eat and to keep the power on in the house. Suddenly then you take on an employee, and then the seriousness kind of changes. Yeah, thanks, Kaz. I'll talk about the suits in a bit, actually. Our style has changed over the years. But yeah, it changed. It became more serious. It suddenly felt like there was risk on the table. And Pete, I think to kind of Holiday Extras dislike, was actually working at Holiday Extras as well. And he left to come to work with us, and we weren't in an office. This makes it like we worked in an office at that point. We didn't. He came and worked to work in Luke's parents' dining room, and the only benefit we could offer him was that every morning we would move our cars off the driveway, and he got a dedicated parking space on the driveway, and that was like the employee benefits of 2010. And Pete was on board with that, so it was a really good effort. And Pete was a great guy, and worked with us for a number of years actually, and it was a good start. But as I say, it became way more serious at that point, I would say, or certainly the feeling of responsibility. And it didn't change the dynamic, but I think it made us work even harder. I didn't know that was possible, but I think it did. And sometimes you've got to take that leap. So kind of moving on, this is where I'm going to talk a bit more about suits and kind of how we looked. And I don't wear that suit very often. I think my wedding actually was the last time I wore a proper suit, I think, has. You've got to fake it until you make it. And it's a bit of a throwaway comment, but again, if you go back to this picture, like nobody was going to trust those two people with like hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of marketing spend, really. We couldn't present ourselves as working in the living room and dining room of like Luke's parents. It just wasn't going to work, particularly as we come from a business where we were marketing, and had budgets of millions of pounds, so it's not like we were used to spending, and managing and dealing with big budgets. But this doesn't look like the corporate photo you present on a website. It is very ironic, Amber, that we're now working from our homes. Totally, yeah, 100%. So this was like the beginnings of our first corporate image. So again, we roped in Isabel, Luke's girlfriend. We threw in a bottle of champagne, because what else shouts out like successful business and someone you can trust in a bottle of champagne? But as you can see, there's like the picture rail on the top of that picture from the front room. So we photoshopped that out and we photoshopped in a logo behind us, because then it looks like you've actually in the kind of company branded office, and it all looks a bit more professional. And that was actually our first kind of corporate image, if you like, that went on the website below the picture fold. So I was wearing shorts and Luke had some like ripped jeans on. So it was that classic, just make it for the photo. But that was the beginning of our kind of image, if you like. We then, when Pete joined, we kind of took this one, and it kind of makes it look like we're in a bigger office here. But that little glass room is literally all we had money to rent, and there wasn't enough room in there for 4 people to sit down. But we made it look like the rest of the office was our kind of first space, and that kind of worked for us. And we did move out of that space into the larger space kind of later on, soon after. This is what I like to call the boy band phase. We were kind of that moody black and white image with the highlighted purple. Again, really struggling with how to kind of present ourselves. We got rid of the suit-ish, but we still had the kind of oversized shirts combo. And actually on this day, we were taking this photo, and a really good friend of ours, Faye, happened to turn up by chance. We were like, quick, get in the photo because it makes us look bigger. So she jumped in, really appreciated it, but she never did work for us. She worked for HSBC, if I remember correctly. So yeah, I mean, at this point, we were trying to present an image that we thought people wanted to see, so they would, ultimately kind of trust us to do some great work, which we did. But first impressions do kind of matter. But what you're seeing now, and this is a more recent photo, we moved into our 7th floor of the Civic Centre building. I think is a business that's much more comfortable in its own skin, that's happy to be who we are, and that's something that we've really tried to embrace. And hopefully some of those images you saw at the beginning of this presentation kind of highlights that fact that. And I think now as a in business generally, we are, and as a community, we are much more, we embrace individualism. I felt like when we started, you had to have a certain corporate look for people to take you seriously. And I think that's changed. And I think that's a wonderful thing. The emphasis on kind of personal brand and building up kind of your own image actually has really helped, I think, propel that forwards. And now actually it's okay just to be who you are. And that's something that we really do kind of celebrate as a business. So that's a bit about kind of faking it till you make it, but being you is what it's all about now. I'm happy to say I'm quite comfortable with that and quite happy with that too, as a business. Cool. So award wins and losses. Talk a little bit about awards. Just quick. I don't know how many people we've got in the room, so it might not be enough to make this that interesting. But quick, either show of hands or yes in the chat if you've entered any business awards. And I know you're going to put like lots of yeses in because you're in all them. Cool, cheers, Dan. So yeah, we've got a few. Anyone won any awards? We have, so I'll put my hand up. Got any nods? Oh, so that's the awkward question. Any losses? Anyone been in and they've lost? I say lost. Came second. I guess it's kind of the same thing. Just kidding. Dan, yeah, no, it happens. Us too. We don't shout about it, but yeah, totally. We have. 2012, we won for the first time we won an award, and Luke won a Young Entrepreneur of the Year, which was awesome. And it was such an amazing moment. It was a great celebration of kind of what Luke's brought to the business and his vision and his drive. And it was just, it allowed us to kind of feel much more credible. If you go back to some of those photos of us in the dining room and trying to make it look like we're a real business, awards are an amazing thing for kind of credibility. And actually we've entered a lot of awards over the years. And they brought some amazing kind of wins for us. It's been awesome. Keepers, yeah, absolutely. I'll be talking about that, Kaz, for sure. And it's a great thing. It really is. But it takes a lot of work, to kind of be entered kind of for awards. There are the kind of applications, then there's usually interviews. Then there's the award nights, which are never cheap. I'm not kind of complaining. I'm just saying they're not necessarily cheap, but there are also massive benefits from being at awards. We've had some fantastic successes. Makes us look credible. That helps kind of with trust. We've met new clients. It has been great. But for all the awards that we've won, there's awards that we haven't won, inevitably. Martello, I don't think it is Martello. No, come back to me. I know. I've used it on the tip of my tongue. Can't remember who it is, so it will come to me. But for all those awards that we've won, they haven't. There have been awards that we haven't. And I mean, you must know what that's like. You're sat at the table, kind of had your dinner. You didn't really want to eat your dinner, but what you really want to know is, have you won the award or not? They're announcing the finalists, and then they don't say your name as the winner. And then you spend the rest of the night not networking, not making the most of it, but just slagging off the judges. Like, it's pretty much what you do, isn't it? It happens. It's like justifying why they weren't qualified to make that decision, when the reality is, I'm sure they were, and it was no doubt a good decision, but it's hard to take. It is tough to take, particularly initially. And I remember the first couple of times we didn't win the prize, and it felt gutting. It was like, right, I'm out. We're not doing any more awards. I don't want to put that effort in. But yeah, it's exactly like the VAR. but it, that's part of it. And to be honest with you, kind of just got to suck it up and get on with it. You've got to be in it to win it, like everything in life. If you don't put yourself out there, you kind of won't move forward. And I think that was one of the realizations we've had, and we put a huge amount of work now into kind of awards, because there are so many benefits to it, and also being able to celebrate as a team and getting that external validation, particularly when you don't know what you don't know sometimes. It does mean a lot for someone to say, you know what, I think you're the best at something. That that does help. You can't pin everything on it, because if they don't say you're not the best at it, it can be pretty hard. But there are usually lessons to be learned there as well. So pragmatism, I think you've got to try your best to be fairly pragmatic, and I feel like we're there now most of the time, Kaz. So this is an interesting one. Somebody actually asked me this question recently, which is why I put it in here, because it kind of really made me reflect. What would you go back and kind of tell yourself, if you could? I guess with the idea of how could you make things better? How could you do things faster and improve, the journey that you've kind of been on? So I guess the learning from this one for me, and the thought process behind this, is there are a few, donkeys out there, I guess, or jackasses if we were in the States. We've learned over the years that unfortunately, whilst we try to, operate kind of honestly and with integrity as an organization, I believe it's better to trust people in life and be disappointed than to not trust anybody. Unfortunately, there are people out there that don't operate in the same way, and we've learned some really harsh lessons, whether they're financial ones where we've kind of been hung out to dry for kind of large debts, and we haven't acted soon enough, or we haven't taken the right steps because we were a bit naive. There have been lots of kind of lessons that we've learned over the years, and we spend a lot of time kind of analyzing those lessons and trying to kind of be better next time, always trying to kind of take away the wins from a situation like that. So and particularly though, some of the ones that I remember where we were stung for quite a lot of money, totally unfairly, on one occasion by somebody who knew exactly what they were doing, and it later transpired that they have a whole kind of history of doing this with many people. These things aren't just costly in terms of financials and in terms of kind of resource. Emotionally they can be incredibly draining. But would I go back and tell myself anything to kind of change some of the outcomes? Absolutely not. Absolutely not, because if it wasn't for all those experiences, the learnings wouldn't have kind of happened in the same way. And so I wouldn't be the person that I am now if I didn't go through all of those experiences, and the business wouldn't be the business it is now if, the business hadn't kind of learned all of those things. So whilst I like the concept of that question, what could you do better? And I think, taken in a different context, it would work quite nicely to think about what things you could have done better. But, would I actually change anything? Kind of no, I wouldn't. And I think that's an important thing to remember, is that, and any decent management or business coach or consultant or whatever would tell you the same. It's it's the learnings and the tough times that really kind of make you ready for kind of achieving the most in all parts of life. So that kind of moves me nicely on to kind of 2014 and that year. And that year was an important year, I think, for me personally, which I suspect has hopefully benefited the business as well. In that I was getting to a point where I was really struggling with kind of the pressure of running a business and all of the things that kind of came with that. And we talk a lot about mental health in our business, and worldwide it's we recognize it more and more than ever before. And actually in 2014 I was also in the lead up, so I'd got engaged in 2014, planning to be kind of married in 2015, bought a house in 2014, which everyone told me it's the most stressful thing you ever do, and I didn't believe them, but it was the most stressful thing, I think, up there with running the business. It was insane. I was really struggling. I actually reached out to somebody who was there to help me with an anxiety I had around public speaking. Hated it, I avoided it. And that is such an important role of I think a senior person in business, to be speaking publicly, like we are now, that it was a weakness that, ate me up. And so I eventually decided to take action. Anyway, the guy that I saw was a great combination of hypnotherapy, CBT, psychologist. And within about 30 seconds of talking to me, he got straight under the bonnet. Was like, we can talk about this public speaking thing, but what we really need to deal with is all this stuff over here. And I was like, all right, okay, cool. Well, I wasn't expecting you to say that, but yeah, why not? Let's go for it. And that kind of, those sessions that I spent working with this particular individual who was amazing have literally changed my life, like without a shadow of a doubt. Probably one of the most critical points for me. One of the things that I recognize, there are a number of things that kind of we worked on together back in 2014 into 2015. But one of this message, kind of I come first, sounds incredibly selfish. And it's like, it's all about me. But the concept there is that, and actually the belief that I set and I totally buy into is that I will always try to be there for my friends and family and those who are most important to me. but I come first, because the reality is, if I'm not focusing on me being in a good place, I can't be in a good place for you. I can't be in a good place for my wife, for my children, for my business partner, for you know, the many employees we have now that, you know, rely on the business performance to kind of pay bills and mortgages and so on. You know, and that was a real turning point in my life, I would say. The realization that has to be the way. If I don't constantly work on me being in a good place, you know, I will let other people down. And also often we stretch ourselves to help other people at the sacrifice of our own well-being, but that isn't sustainable. Going back to the point I made about day one, it needs 100%, but that's not sustainable. You know, that is so true. It's not sustainable. And you have to kind of put yourself forward, put yourself first, to make sure that you can do the things you really want to do. And that's something that I've worked on fairly relentlessly since that point. You know, every day thinking about my beliefs, what I want to achieve, my positive affirmations, whatever it might be, my you know, my exercise routine, which all helps me manage my mental health. And I think as a world, we're starting to come around to that concept that, you know, just like staying fit in the gym, we've got to put the same amount of effort, if not more, you know, into our kind of mental well-being. And it's something that me and Luke's been ahead of me on this one without a doubt. He, you know, he's a real inspiration when it comes to this. He works tirelessly at kind of making sure he's the person that kind of people need him to be, by making sure he does what's right for kind of him in the moments that he can. So, you know, for me, that's been massive. Was a huge. I think if that hadn't happened at that point, I'm not sure how kind of, you know, whether we'd be celebrating 13 years in it the way we are in its current format kind of right now. So that's a big one. That's a big learning for me. Okay, so 2015, team fit matters. We as an organisation typically kind of recruit in junior levels. And we're looking for potential. You know, our mission is to kind of awaken potential in our clients, you know, in our giants, and kind of, you know, everybody else that's kind of involved with our brand. And what we've kind of found consistently over the years is team fit has to come first. You know, if the team fit isn't there, it kind of all falls down. I'd say around the 2015 mark, we were doing lots of stuff like this, you know, out having fun, you know, building the kind of team dynamic, building our kind of culture of togetherness, which we're reintroducing now that we can all get together now physically, not just virtually. And we had a few kind of sharp learnings, I would say. One in particular, there was someone we had to kind of let go because we found them retweeting horrendous content on Twitter. I won't verbalize it because I don't want to do it that almost like justice, but it was horrendous. And then we found there was a manager in the business that, for all intents and purposes, looked very effective, but was a bully, is the only way I can describe it. And had we not taken action on that person, a number of people who are now already senior in our business wouldn't be here still. And I think the realization has always been there that team fit has to come first when it comes to recruitment. But it's also then not something that you kind of let go, you know, and it's something that when you see a problem, it needs to be addressed in that regard. And if it isn't, you know, the implications can be really catastrophic. And like any kind of negativity, you know, it spreads. Now, that doesn't mean you can have a really great person and they're not capable of doing anything. You know, capability is definitely still a consideration there, but we wouldn't hire somebody for capability at the expense of team fit. That's the kind of consideration there. And yeah, Dan, totally. It's such an important part. And I think in that year that really started to kind of crystallize, not just about the onboarding of kind of new giants, but also thinking about kind of who's in the team, because we don't get it right 100% of the time, you know. And you know, I still stand by the fact that the decision to recruit is the most important decision we make as a business every time we make it, because if you get it wrong, the implications that can be so severe. So moving on, 2016. Oh, I like this section because I've become one of those people who can't help sharing photos of their children. So I'm going to share a couple of photos with you. So life happened in 2016. So I got married in 2015. Lucy, my wife, and I waited no time. 2016. This is not all three of our children. We weren't that quick, but the little boy on the right is my son Lincoln, and actually the two little girls there is Aria and Ella, who are Luke's two children. So Luke was a couple of years ahead of us in terms of kind of having a family. I love this shot, so I always kind of like to use it where I can. Yeah, I love that reaction. Like that reaction, Kaz. It was kind of a shock to the system, I'd say. Actually, I'm going to share another photo because why not? You know, I love sharing it. So there's my two now. So I now have two children. So Lincoln, who's 4-5 this year, and Evelyn, who is 2-3 in October. It was amazing. Lincoln coming on the scene was incredible, but boy, did I not realize how that was going to change things. You know, up until that point, everything had been SGM first, and to the, you know, just the admiration of my wife Lucy, who has somehow stood by me through all of those early years, where, you know, as amazing as she is and was then, SGM always came first. Suddenly there was this new level of importance in my life. Like, it wasn't that SGM became less important, it was like there's this thing that was even more important at a level I didn't even know existed or was possible, and that was Lincoln, and that was the concept of then suddenly having to be a father as well as, you know, business owner with responsibilities to business performance and people, etc., etc. And I think for, you know, quite a period of time, I tried to do what I was doing as well as then trying to, you know, be a parent, be, you know, a supportive kind of husband to Lucy, because it, you know, it wasn't an easy time. First child, I'm sure there are people in the room that can relate to that, and it really wasn't kind of easy to do. And I think had I continued to try to do the best of both, almost everything that I was previously, and not recognize that change needs to happen, again, you know, things would have kind of not worked out so well, is my thought. And yeah, absolutely, Kaz. We do underestimate it, particularly when you're letting them go off to school for the first time, which I have done a couple of weeks ago, which is just a scary moment. But I think, you know, it happens, you know, change. And I think as a business owner, kind of this view of like, it's SGM, we've got to move forward, we've got our goals, objectives, etc. We've got to hit them, and being totally inflexible around that, you know, is a recipe for disaster. And actually life does happen. And, you know, this is just one example of a significant life change. There are many out there, you know, not always positive, but we need to recognize that does happen and kind of embrace it and work with it and accept it, I think. And that's certainly what's happened to me. And I feel like, and there's been some personal challenges for me over the last few months, which I'll talk about in a bit, but, you know, I kind of feel like when you embrace the change, actually it makes you better. When you have the time to focus on the things that you need to do, you become more effective at it, rather than just trying to do everything you once were with all these extra responsibilities, and you do everything badly. That embracing is quite key. So yeah, that was a big one. That was a big one for me in 2016, and still is. Oh yeah, I bet, Gaz, driving test. That's a scary one. Passing driving test, being out the cars, I don't know. I'm hoping by the time they're old enough to drive, we won't need to drive because it'll all be automated, and then we don't have to worry about it. Google will take care of us. In Google we trust. Anyway, moving on. 2017, we don't have all the answers. So I think this is quite an interesting one. Again, as a business, you know, if we go back to 2008, sorry, when we started, you know, we went from holiday extras, knowing a lot about PPC and SEO and you know, the things that we did as a day job. But in terms of running a business and offering a service, you know, we did not know what we were doing at all. Like it was a really steep learning curve, hence the need to kind of give everything we possibly had to kind of get up to speed with what the world wanted and our potential clients wanted. And we really did, you know, and as a result of that, I think as we've developed the business, people have joined and we've helped to kind of upskill them, and they brought new things to the table as well, but it's kind of joined at junior level. We've kind of always found the answers from within, you know, within the team, and that's been great and super successful. But there does sometimes come a point when you realize that actually maybe there's value out there from other people that you could be bringing into your organization. At the end of 2017, we were approaching our kind of 2018 10-year anniversary, and we were kind of reflecting on the year and what it had been, and the 10 years, you know, and how they looked. And they've been a great 10 years. But we were discussing, well, what do we do over the next 10 years, and how do we accelerate that performance? Because it's been good, but we want it to be great, you know, going from good to great. Jim Collins I'm a big fan of all of his kind of work, and his book Good to Great is a fantastic read if you haven't read it. But he talks about businesses that move from good to great, and we very much wanted to achieve that same kind of concept. And we went away and we read some books around this particular model, the EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. I think a couple of you in the room have heard me talk about EOS a number of times, so apologies. And I won't go into too much detail because it's not so much about the detail that's the important point here. But EOS is a management system that forces you to look at people and process and data and culture and vision for the business, and lay out a structure of working that hopefully brings efficiency, I guess, but more than that, it's traction. It's the ability to make change, and effectively we went through a process of implementing this system across the business with everybody's involvement, like the entire organization, particularly when it came to cultural values. We worked on it and built it together, and we got buy-in from the whole business. And I think that was an amazing thing that happened there, that came about. You know, as a business, we made it from 2018 to 2019, we made a real step change, and we really did accelerate kind of our growth. And actually 2020, January, the beginning of 2020, we were set up for like such a massive year. It was going to be insane. Now, a couple of things changed in 2020. I won't give away any, no spoilers. I'll tell you what that is in a minute. But that did change the kind of direction of 2020. But bringing in this kind of external model, which worked for us and may not work for everybody. It's about finding what's right for you, but thinking about external input and external experience coming to the business, I think is a really important thing. And for us at that time, that was super valuable. We have also brought in some great experience into the business at a high level. We have Lauren, our head of finance, who came from some big organizations, wasn't kind of grown from within. Danny, our head of brand and marketing, you know, he has a background in all sorts of areas that he's brought to the table. Lee, head of commercial, came in at a more junior level, but has a massive experience background in sales as well. So, we had, it's not that we hadn't ever brought anybody in from more kind of experienced roles, but it kind of this year, I think we did a lot more of it. And then the year just gone, we've really embraced that. We've recruited, we're still promoting from within, but we're also looking at opportunities to bring people in that can bring new experience. People who don't know, we don't know what we don't know. And sometimes you need kind of fresh minds to come in and help you identify those things. However, I hasten to add and remind that team fit still counts first. You can have all the best experience in the world, but if you're not going to fit within the team, particularly critical if you're a new person coming in, I think that then it can all go wrong. So that's an important thing to kind of keep in mind. So moving on, so 2018, so we've made it. So this is a really interesting one, and what we've made it means. So we've made it means, we made it to 10 years. At the beginning of the journey, we had no idea what the kind of future looked like, but we were excited and wanted to start something that we thought could be giant. And at 2018, we got to the point of the 10-year anniversary, but we also hit a kind of a financial milestone. In 2018, we kind of broke the £2 million revenue mark as an organisation. Now, the financial point isn't kind of so. The reason why I talk about that is we're not necessarily financially motivated, although it is an important thing to be kind of looking at, of course, along with all the other financial metrics, because it ultimately financial health means that the business is sustainable, and that comes from profitability and so on, and cash flow. So it's key, but that wasn't necessarily the motivation. But the reason why kind of that was an important thing to achieve in 2018 for us, along with our 10-year milestone, was, if I go back to when we first set up the business, a big part of Luke's role at that time, my business partner, was to build a network, and he'd done that, incredibly well. I mean, Luke's a person who kind of, knows everyone, brings value to everyone he meets. He's just, he does that so incredibly well. It's amazing. And hopefully those of you who met him kind of recognize that as well, and have benefited from it. But I remember one particular Friday, because on a Friday we would always go for a drink. We couldn't, just one beer, we couldn't afford to do much else, but once a week we'd get out of the house that we spent all of our time in, and meet up. And Luke had actually been to London, where he'd been meeting an agency, Harvest Digital, I think they were called, and they were a big kind of web build and search agency at the time. And he met with their MD, and they were exchanging notes, and we were trying to learn as much as we possibly could to help guide our first steps. And Emma, her name was, she had kind of mentioned that their overheads, in order to break even, they had to kind of generate, I can't remember exactly the exact number, but it was around 200k a year. It was they needed to generate about 2 million a year, I should say, in order just to break even. And at that point, we were like, in order to break even, we just stopped eating. That's the control mechanism we had, because we couldn't afford to spend the money. And so the idea of having to kind of generate enough revenue to kind of, for 2 million to be the break even point, felt so far away at that point that it was demoralizing. It wasn't like we weren't inspired. I remember sitting at the bar, and the Frenchman in Folkestone that's kind of re-rained many times. It wasn't the most classy joint in the world, but it served Foster's, which is the cheapest beer. So we were there, thinking, oh my God, that seems so far away. I don't know, what were we even doing? We really did kind of question what we were doing, I think, at that point. And anyway, we didn't give up, fortunately. But what we did do, and there was no one defining moment that's happened over the last kind of 13 years and over the 10 years this point is applicable to, but we just kept taking small steps, consistent small steps. And they weren't always steps forward either. They were often steps backwards, but we kept on kind of making those steps. And that's what got us to a point where actually those sorts of numbers were, became the norm. And that's why that was such a, I think, a point of celebration, in 2018. So moving on, just a couple more slides now. Celebrating the wins. This is a really important one for me, and it's one that I've relearned recently as well. But the reason I put this one in as kind of my 2019 learnings. I've spoken about it before, and I've got a few just awesome pictures here from Kaz. You mentioned it in our quick conversation that we had before this session. You know, in 2018, we took the team to Ibiza to celebrate the 10 years of Sleeping Giant Media, and it was just an incredible trip. It was amazing. It really was a highlight of my life today, without a doubt. But the importance of celebrating wins, it's like, you know, we often kind of just take them for granted, you know, but what we do is we then take the losses, the things that don't go away, we take them to heart and we dwell on them and we analyze them and we try to pull out learnings, we pull together teams to understand what went wrong. And then we end up just sowing, kind of like setting these feelings of loss and missing out and being frustrated in, and we don't put the same effort into the wins. Like we just go, okay, well, I did that because I wanted to win, and we did win. So I did what I thought I was going to do so great. I'm going to move on now to the next thing that I could change. You know, and that's such a mistake, and it's, again, I think, not sustainable. So I guess the learning a number of times has been for me to celebrate the wins. The reason I put this down as 2019 is, having said all this, and I've said this to many people over the years, 2019 we went for 3 keepers, and they were really important keepers to us. They were it was customer service, commitment to customer service. There was the one for the apprentice of the year, because, you know, our mission is to awaken potential. It's all about bringing people up and helping them achieve their potential. And then there was the employer of the year award as well. And I gave the presentations for 2 of those 3 awards. I felt like they went really well. And I felt really good about them. And I didn't ever want to jinx it. And I've never said out loud, I think we're going to win. But internally, I was like, I don't think we could have done that any better. It felt so good. However, when it came to the night of the awards, I was meant to be going, but there was this forecast that we needed to do for a really big client opportunity. And I made a decision to bail out. Someone tagged in and went in my place, Holly, I think it was. And I stayed in the office and I spent hours on this financial model that I hoped would kind of clinch a deal with a new client. And as I sat there with Twitter open, I watched the awards come in, and we won all 3 of those awards. And on one hand, I felt just amazing about it. I was like, awesome. But I also felt a bit bitter because I wasn't there, and I prioritized this work, which, to be honest with you, probably could have been done. It was time critical, but could have been done at another time, over kind of celebrating that win. And that was a mistake. You know, it was awesome that we won, but I kind of should have been there to celebrate the win. And yeah, I'm glad that you were there. It was a good night, wasn't it? It looked like a good night, I should say. Ironically as well, and annoyingly, we didn't win the client either. So after all that, but as I say, you've got to be in it to win it sometimes. That's just the way it goes. But I think that point about kind of celebrating the wins and not taking them for granted, you know, is super key to ensuring there is sustainability kind of in your business and in your life. Oh, thanks, Kaz. Really appreciate the feedback. Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. Much appreciated. I'll try not to trip myself up now. We'll see how we go. We are a team, not a family. So this is my kind of penultimate point. We're a team, not a family. So I just want to quickly say, no offense to any family kind of run businesses in the room. There's nothing wrong with being a family run business, but hopefully this, because I grew up in a family run business actually, but I would, I hopefully can kind of just explain what I mean here. You know, I feel like, and at 2020, the obvious thing to talk about here would be COVID. I'm kind of going to touch on it because it did impact our business somewhat, to say the least. But kind of what I want to talk about is, you know, what we achieved in 2020. I think this concept of us being a team and not a family was cemented in 2020. You know, we've said it for many years, and we've talked about that concept of being a team and not a family. And the reason we talk about it is, you know, I think there are many great attributes to kind of being like a family, for sure. The support, the care, you know, the connective kind of nature of a family kind of ecosystem. But there are also things that come with being a team that don't typically come as being a family. You know, the expectation of performance, you know, the full commitment, no matter what. All of those things, I think, are incredibly important that don't always come. You know, I mentioned I was in a family business. It was a restaurant that my grandfather owned that passed on to my father unwillingly, but we were a Greek family and the eldest had to take over the business. So he was kind of unwillingly kind of pushed into it a little bit. You know, and I've been amazing memories. I learned so much from growing up in that business, you know, so many great things. But also I remember my father and my grandfather arguing all the time in front of all the staff, you know, always. And like that's not cool in business really. But that was father and son working together in a very tense kind of business. Catering was always pretty stressful as well. So that probably didn't help. But I feel like that concept of being a team and needing to kind of knowing there's support there, but there's also an expectation to kind of perform is what's helped get us through kind of like 2020. And again, just a reminder of some of the giants that kind of, you know, are in our business kind of right now. You know, last year was a challenging year that I don't need to go into because I'm sure everybody felt the kind of challenges. and we had to make some really tough calls over the course of 2020. Really wasn't an easy year to kind of get through, and where people had to make kind of sacrifices, in terms of, how we were going to make sure that financially we were secure. Now, we didn't lose anybody. We were really lucky, fortunate not to make any redundancies, but we still made some tough calls, and everybody stepped up and supported each other more than I've ever seen before. And actually, whilst last year wasn't our biggest year in terms of finances, I think last year was one of, if not our most successful year as a business. I think we delivered some amazing outcomes for our clients, the ones that, weren't completely kind of sidelined as a result of COVID. And even for the ones that were, we still added some amazing value. And I think for ourselves, we've all developed, we supported each other in ways, even though it's all remote, but supported each other in ways we never have done in the past. And I think, ironically, we're closer as a team, despite being kind of physically separate for so long. And I think that, that's been a real win. So, that's what I take from 2020. It's been a hugely successful year and it's laid a great foundation for this year. But I think it's really important to kind of bear in mind that concept that we are a team, kind of and not a family, and I think a winning team. Okay, cool. So that kind of moves me on to 2021. Business is personal. So many people say that kind of business, it's not personal, it's just business. But this one is personal. And I wasn't sure, I don't think I could give this presentation honestly without talking about kind of this year for me. So what I've done is I actually pre-recorded a section, or I think I might ramble a little bit. We'll see if you think I'm eloquent enough after this podcast, but I'm going to kind of share the video recording, and then we can jump in and kind of wrap up and take some questions after this. Hopefully it'll make sense once it's finished. Can you guys just give me a nod if you can hear the sound? Because I'm just aware the sound's going to be really important here, because otherwise it's not going to look good for anyone. Okay, so let's talk about the importance of relationships in business. I'd really like to talk about my thoughts on why business is personal. Oh, okay, that was just a tester, guys. I'm still in. Let's go. Okay, so let's talk about the importance of relationships in business. I'd really like to talk about my thoughts on why business is personal, and why relationships matter so much. Something I've talked a lot about kind of in the past. But in order to really do that, I need to set the scene for you. I need to give you an insight into kind of my experience of this year, 13 years of Sleeping Giant Media. So if I take you back to the beginning of 2021, off the back of, what's been a challenging yet successful year from 2020, we were hoping to kind of launch into 2021. We expected a challenging Q1, but with ambitions to really kind of grow the business across the remainder of 2021. What I wasn't expecting was the personal challenge that kind of developed for me fairly early on in the year. So my wife, Lucy, who I haven't really talked too much about yet, but has been a massive part of kind of my journey at Sleeping Giant Media, and of course, the journey from just business owner to business owner, husband, and proud dad as well. She started to become quite unwell at the beginning of 2021. We struggled to get a diagnosis for what was wrong with her. We saw many doctors, many GPs, private kind of consultants, etc. And she had a few trips to hospital as well, but no one was really able to tell us what was kind of going on with her until the beginning of March, so a couple of months in, where she unfortunately was diagnosed with APML, which is a very rare subtype of AML leukemia. Now, before I get too emotional, I'm just going to skip to the end of the story. Lucy is very much still with us. I'm happy to share that she is in remission. And while she's going through what I can only describe as cycles of very brutal treatment, it is incredible treatment nonetheless, because it's saving her life. And we really hope that by the end of this year, we'll be able to look back on 2021 at a point where her treatment is finished and just start focusing on the future. So Lucy is good. She's doing incredibly well, and she's a superstar. But if I just take you back to where we were at the beginning of March. So Lucy's diagnosis came in. It came in extremely late in the day, almost too late. One of the challenges with the particular leukemia that Lucy had, whilst it has a great prognosis long term, that's dependent on the patient surviving the first 30 days. And due to the quite common complications that come with this type of leukemia, the prognosis for those first 30 days, the survival rate fundamentally is relatively low. So that posed a real challenge for us as a family, and was a real challenging time. Lucy was admitted into the William Harvey. She was moved quite quickly to the haematology unit at Canterbury Hospital, and then when she was stable enough to be transported, which took kind of 7 to 10 days maybe, she was moved to UCL in London, where they are specialists in treating leukemia and have the most experience with this particular subtype of kind of Lucy's condition. She was in that hospital for 7 weeks, and obviously with the backdrop of COVID, you know, none of us could see her. She didn't have any visitors. She wasn't actually allowed to leave her hospital room for that entire period of time because of the risk of kind of infection, as I'm sure you can kind of understand, imagine. So that was a challenging time. That first week particularly, we didn't know kind of day to day what was going to happen. You know, I have, you know, been focused on the development of sleep and joint media for so many years. You know, the challenge of then also kind of balancing parenting along with that was massive, as I've talked about, but also an enjoyable challenge. But then to suddenly be switched into kind of primary carer role for our children whilst all this was going on was quite something to kind of behold. But, you know, I think we managed well. I'm kind of really proud of what we did, and thank you to the wonders of technology. You know, we were able to kind of FaceTime and communicate with Lucy that way when she was well enough to kind of talk to us. So we weren't completely cut off from her, but, you know, not quite the same as being by her bedside. Now, whilst that was an incredibly challenging time, some amazing things happened over those first few weeks, and have continued to happen actually up until right now, today. People started stepping up for me. You know, my business partner, Luke, was just, I can't put into words the incredible friend that he was. He did everything that needed to be done without me having to ask. He seemed to know what would help and what wouldn't. You know, our senior team, you know, was stepped up. Danny, Lee, Nell, Chris, Justine, Lauren, our fellow board member Masoodin, you know, jumped in to do whatever needed to do, because, you know, any personal crisis in the business, you know, present challenges. But whilst we don't like to stand on hierarchy and ceremony, fundamentally, you know, a crisis at the top of the business where, you know, fundamentally accountability for paying the bills sits, you know, runs the risk of destabilizing business. But everybody stepped up for me, and I'm so grateful for that, and actually it was inspiring to look back at what was kind of done to help support me and support our business kind of through that challenging period, particularly the first few weeks. But then when I look back at the last 13 years, you know, particularly the last 6 months, again, also particularly the last year and a half with COVID, actually it's kind of almost not surprising, because we've been stepping up for each other as a team, you know, day in, day out, you know, for all the big things and of course all the little things that all matter. You know, as an organisation, you know, we focus on being a team, and teammates that kind of support each other through the good and the bad, you know, and that's been happening for a long time. And I think the reason for that is because we focus very much on team, on people fit, on building relationships. You know, I've said it before that, you know, you should never burn relationships. Life is all about building kind of successful, reciprocal kind of relationships. You know, and I think that if you look at the most successful people out there, you know, they are great relationship builders. And so I guess to kind of wrap up this section from me in pre-recorded mode, you know, the success of Sleep and Giant Media has been all about building relationships. You know, that was really driven home to me over the last 6 months, without a shadow of a doubt. But I guess the question I would put to you is, you know, are there people out there that would step up for you in the moments that matter? You know, do you feel like, looking around the room, you know, in your teams, do you feel like you would actually step up for those people? You know, and if not, you know, I'd have to question, or ask you to question, are they the right people kind of in your organisation? And I know there's a number of people out there that are probably working on their own. You know, they don't have a business partner, they probably don't have a senior team. Well, you know, what are you doing to build kind of support structures kind of around you, and also looking at who you could also be kind of supporting and influencing and sharing knowledge with, to help them through their kind of most trying times and to help them get the best out of their opportunities. So in my view, business is personal, and it's during those times particularly that those relationships that you build really, really matter. Okay, cool. So let's talk. Sorry, I'm not going again, don't worry. I can't seem to skip the slide, but I'm sure it will go in a second.
Okay,
so let's... Okay, we'll come out the presentation because that's the end of it. So guys, I hope you can understand. I was hoping not to use that. I just have to use that video, but yeah, but felt like I needed to, so I did. And that pretty much brings me to the end of kind of this presentation. So I'll go back into presenter mode there. That again, just to reiterate, it's all about relationships for me, and that has been a big part of the success of kind of our business. And I think it's not just about business, it's about life, isn't it? And that would be the advice I'd give to everyone: focus on relationships. And I think with that comes great outcomes. And that's it.
Thank you so much. How on earth I can follow that? An emotional, bittersweet, but also aspirational account. Thank you for sharing the painful, emotional parts. I think business development is always a journey, and that does sound a little bit of a cliche, and I don't mean it to be. Without further ado, do any of our guests kindly unmute, have any questions for Anthony or for Amber today? Vesta, I see that you're with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Always great to have non-members with us. Was there anything that particularly resonated on Anthony's story for you? If you could kindly unmute.
Hello, everyone. Really great talk, Anthony. Enjoy listening to you.
Thanks, Vesta.
I actually, follow the sleeping giants for quite a while now. I have attended some trainings which I really enjoy. Probably Amber remember me. Yes, as you mentioned, Kaz, I mean, very emotional end of the talk. I still have those goose things in my hands. No, I don't really have any questions, just feeling very thankful. Thanks for the talk, Anthony.
You're very welcome. I think that no matter how successful, and Sleeping Giant are one of the most successful agencies, they're still relatable, and everyone has personal stories. Dan, was there anything that you'd like to contribute today? If you could kindly unmute.
Hi, Kaz, thank you. No, just really sort of blown away by that, Ant, if I'm honest. Kind of resonates with a personal experience I had a few years ago. Where I was on the kind of side that your wife was on, and my wife and my family had to find ways to support me for sort of 5 months. I guess really the hard, it kind of resonates with everything you said in your meeting. I made a number of notes about the same sort of words, sayings that I use and remind myself on a daily basis. But really, it's just amazing how really that you balanced the work-life balance anyway, doing the role that you do, but then also going through that and having to look after 2 kids. Just hats off to you. I mean, it's, I know how hard that is. I find it hard to balance work life now, being in a happy marriage with a 1-year-old. It's so difficult, and to have all of that going on as well is just amazing. So well done.
Absolutely.
I want to buy you a beer. It's just so emotional.
No, he's celebrating. It's 13 years. It should be cake. He was wondering how one should celebrate. You always celebrate with cake. I don't get it. Before you close, as Moomin, delightful to have you with us, as we don't see you very often these days. You've been on my radar for a while. You had a question. What was the main learning, Anthony and Amber, that you took from the EOS process?
I think that's a great question. And Dan, also, thank you for what you said there. Really appreciate it. I think the EOS process is a really good question. There are so many parts to that have had impact. I think personally, the most impact, there's 2 things. One, values. So we reset our values, but we based them on people who were in the business that we all felt embodied the culture of Sleeping Giant Media. And so they became more real than just a few words on a wall, certainly to me personally, and I feel across the business. They were based on traits that the people that we would say as kind of stars in the business all had in common. So that was a great process to go for. And then we restructured how we recognize success based around all of those values. And it was a values-based review system and remuneration system that we have at SGM. So that was super powerful. The other thing is the traction element, which is all the issues element, all about how you take meetings that we've all been in meetings that go on for hours, and you feel like at the end of it, you've had no value out of it. And it's just been all very little value, not proportionate to the amount of effort you put in. And it kills businesses, that stuff. It kills kind of, effectiveness and you know, emotion and like, you know, how motivated you are. So actually they talk about a concept of a level 10 meeting, which is a meeting you would score 10 out of 10 if you had to score it. And I think, again, a lot of us can relate to not scoring meetings 10 out of 10 many times over again and again. And it helps you build a structure to kind of find solutions to issues that stops you from going off track, that stops the highest paid person in the room getting the final say, and gets you to good, solid outcomes. And we've rolled that out across our entire business. And we meet every Monday as a senior team. And we've now been named the level 10 team because it's a level 10 meeting, is that style. And I think that through COVID, meant that we were able to move, react, prioritize quickly as a senior team and roll out changes really, really quickly. That meeting structure, I mean, the whole thing works well together. So I think if you only took pieces, it wouldn't be as effective. But particularly that meeting structure, the level 10 meeting structure, has had an incredible impact across our business. And I think put us in a place where we were able to respond to the challenges that came last year and react quickly, plan ahead and be effective. And I think that's partly also why we've had a great couple of years.
Thank you very much for that. Was there anybody else that would like to ask in our last few moments a question to either Anthony or to Amber? No, that's fine. It only remains for me to say, Anthony and Amber, as patron members, that it was compelling. It really was compelling and absorbing. And do you know what? Just a little bit addictive in terms of actually articulating the lows as well as the highs, because that's what happens in life, isn't it? If I could kindly also thank my team of Adam and Molly, whose without support, these events wouldn't run as seamlessly as they do. Once again, Anthony, Amber, thank you. I've been Kaz Macklin for Kent Invicta Chamber of Commerce. We wish you guys all a great forward day. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks, Kaz.
Everyone.